What's your greatest, most satisfying I effing called it moment? Viewer edition.
Story 1. The husband guessing the wife's pregnancy is so true. My parents have me and my sister, and both pregnancies my dad said the "you must be pregnant" thing. We were drinking with some friends one day, and my mom mentions that every time she was scared of being pregnant again, Dad would go, "No, you're not. You'll see. It'll come down on the 30th. And our two friends said their husbands do the same thing, and they're always right. The type of connection I want in my marriage. I'm happy I got close with my mother and her friends. They're teaching me a lot about healthy relationships and adulthood in general, while still being the baby of the group. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes people have a sixth sense about those kind of things. They can just feel it. Or they're just really lucky with their guesses. I mean, statistically, someone's gotta be. Not me. Story 2. I heard a single beat of music fly by on the wind from across downtown Indianapolis one day. I said, that's Papa Roach playing. My dad was baffled and immediately began looking up who was playing because we knew there was a big concert happening because we could see the spotlights in the sky over the venue from across the town. I was right, and he still tells people the story.
Story 3. I had a moment like this. I was crossing the Canadian border with my mom, and when the person in front of us was going through customs, I turned to my mom and said, "The girl in front of us is going to get arrested. Just watch." And she said that there was no way that would happen. Skip to a few minutes later, and they have the lady step out of the car and they put her in handcuffs. I just turned to my mom and she was shocked. I worked entrance gate security at my college campus for 2 years, so that might be how I knew something was off.
I mean, if your mom knew that you did gate security, you'd think she would trust you more. I'm going to trust someone on their instincts if they did that kind of work. I mean, if you tell me that someone's, going to start trouble in a line, I believe you, gate security person. I believe you.
Story 4. My favorite called it moment is kind of sad. When I was around 7, I had a best friend, M. One day I left my house to head to my grandparents' and I saw her street closed. There were firefighters and smoke and it was terrifying. I had a gut feeling it was M's house and told my mom. My mom said it wasn't and doubted me. Come to find out, it was M's. Sigh. No one listens. Story 5. I got really obsessed with COVID stats back in December 2019. I remember talking about it with some people at school right before spring break. I commented that we were about 2 to 3 weeks behind the numbers currently being reported in Italy and that I'd be shocked if the school was still open more than a week after we got back from spring break. Everyone thought I was just being dramatic at the time. Unfortunately, I never got to say I told you so since the school was closed for COVID after break. Laugh my butt off. Story 6. One time we were doing this thing in drama class and we were in small groups. We were doing this charades type thing. I was with these 3 other guys and it was one of the guys' turns to go up. I was looking at the board to see what I could choose for my next turn. I saw loyalty and thought it would be a good idea to be a dog for that one. The guy started acting and I thought it would be funny to guess loyalty even though he had only started like 1 second ago and there was no evidence that said he was doing loyalty. I just thought it would be funny. So I guessed loyalty. He said in a somewhat angry voice, but then he paused. Wait, yeah, it was. How did you guess that? I still find it hilarious how I guessed it after a second. Story 7. After watching Star Wars The Force Awakens, Episode 7, I immediately told my family I believe the Rey was a Palpatine due to a stabby move she did that greatly resembles Palp's move after the spinning jump thing in ROTS. Sure enough, Episode 9 reveals that Rey is his granddaughter.
Okay, you called it and you were right, but we should also admit that they didn't have a story planned and they weren't going to do that. I don't think that was planned until they did the 3rd, 9th movie. And also the 9th movie was bad. It was really bad. And the 8th one had problems, but I kind of liked it. But I also don't like Star Wars much. Why am I weighing in on this?
Story 8. My most recent moment was watching the show Wednesday. My sister-in-law always boasts about her sleuthing ability and had finished watching the show before me. She asked me who I thought the 2 culprits were. I called both while still having to watch 4 episodes. She believed it was the one lady right up until the point she got murdered by the creature. Story 9. I have a similar story to number 6. My brother really liked a certain television crime procedural. It followed a team of agents typically investigating murders related to military members. Not having watched the show, I come in and notice some angsty interplay between a male and female member of the team. I simply say, "Oh, so they like each other." My brother denies heartily. By the end of the episode, the male agent has left a bouquet of flowers on her desk. I just don't get how modern depictions of courtship have now become people bickering because they can't be honest about their feelings.
Folks, there are so many things that you can figure out about shows that are running that don't have a set end to the story in mind. Like they're like, we want to keep this series going for as long as possible. Well, then they're always going to need like drama and tension and stuff. And so some of this stuff you can see coming. But even knowing that, pretty impressive that you picked up on that stuff in this show that you don't even really watch. So well done.
Story 10. One day about a year ago, my dad was planning on putting some pork chops in the fryer. My mom and I were really excited because my dad's pork chops are amazing. My dad had made a flour mixture with some seasoning and put it into a large container in the fridge while he thawed the meat. I opened the fridge to grab some water shortly after, and the container slid out, but I managed to catch it. I asked my dad to come and help me fix it since he's always so particular about where things should go. He said, "Just slide it back where it was. It's fine." I slid it back, sat down, watched some YouTube on my phone. Not even 5 minutes later, my dad opened the fridge and the container slid and hit him in the chest, covering him in flour and knocking him down. "I told you so," I said. We had McDonald's for dinner. Story 11. A good friend and I were obsessively watching How I Met Your Mother for years, collected clues from previous episodes, and always made up theories of what's going to happen next. Once it was announced that the last season was coming, I called the entire ending except for Barney having a kid. My friend thought I was crazy to assume such an ending, and I just thought, but it's the only coherent way to end it now. It surely was. Felt super proud. Obviously, I liked the ending because I nailed it. Story 12. My grandmother and I were watching The Night Shift. At the beginning of one episode, we hear a loud thud. Pan to the bloody body of an unconscious girl a few feet away from a 3-story school building. I silently said to myself, "Oof, self-termination attempt." My grandmother leaned in and told me, no, she fell. Fast forward a few minutes later, her best friend was walking with the girl on a stretcher saying, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you fell." The girl on the stretcher said with tears in her eyes, "I didn't fall, I jumped." Called it. Story 13. I was in the theater with my older brother watching a horror movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I think. There was a scene outside a courtroom in some sort of street or back alley with 2 characters talking about the progression of the trial or something. I leaned over to my brother, pointed to one of the 2 characters, and said, "That man is gonna die." Completely out of nowhere. The 2 characters finished their conversation, and the man I had pointed out was still alive. My brother turns to me to say that I was wrong. As he does so, the same character gets hit and killed by a car. My brother's expression was priceless.
Honestly, one of the things that I will say can make a good horror movie for me is if I can't predict who's going to die. Because I will tell you, it becomes really easy to predict in a lot of modern horror stories who's going to die and who did it. Because there's so many little tropes and hints that the movie has to sprinkle along the way. So that way, if you watch it a second time, you can be like, I see it. But I'm nitpicky about movies, and I notice a lot of these things. And so, yeah, I get where you're coming from with this. Have not seen The Exorcism of Emily Rose, so good call on that one.
Story 14. Met a girl on VR chat that supposedly loved me but really wanted to date this other guy. I told her this will blow up in your face again harder than before and you'll literally be crying to me. A conversation with her and the dude later, I effing called it, and to top it all off, he was honest about his problems. He openly admitted he had a bad habit of cheating on people, which he noticed, and told her in the conversation. I was surprised that he admitted that, and that openly. When, to be honest, she unconsciously didn't notice she saw me as a lover to fall back on when everything fails, which I also noticed, but went along with it because I was bored and wondering where this relationship would lead, since some deep part somewhere was like, I'll probably get betrayed again because specific individuals are unconsciously treating others like a fallback/last resort plan on top of not noticing they didn't want said relationship they're already in, so I just endured it. And like I said, I was bored, so I was game to see what love betrayal was I getting myself into. Turns out she and her posse of mindless drones tried framing one of my friends claiming he harassed her. Me being too used to women's BS and social type games was not letting it slide because women in relationships also manipulated and whatnot to me that used to their fun games have had it. To sum it up, she was peed. I, her lover at the time, and I wasn't aware this was happening, yet in the middle of finding all this out, wasn't one of her mindless drones and defended my friend that a lot of people abandoned and taken her side of the story and completely ignored his. When I already knew how this guy acts, him specifically doesn't go anywhere near someone's uncomfortable level, like as in you say he will stop. Then there's, I know he isn't the type to invade someone's bubble of comfort without permission, so I immediately detected BS in her story and sided with him. Turns out a lot of her friends made friends with him only to target him as the accuser, which then what he thought was friends abandoned him. I was the only one, and his remaining friends sided with him, and I got her to F off. She cried to her VR mom and either most likely was in on it or lied and not noticed, so she called us on Discord and called me and my friend freaks of nature. That what's wrong with us? I want to reply better freaks of nature than a manipulative bee, but I didn't reply and she hanged up and never saw her again. Either way, I immediately sensed I was getting emotionally betrayed and manipulated by someone I just didn't expect it to fall this hard is the only thing that caught me by surprise, so I called it.
I think I'm too old. I don't know half of what I just read. I think I've pieced it all together. Be careful about people using you and who you associate with online on VR chat, I guess. This is way out of my ballpark, folks, but yeah, I hope everyone's okay.
Story 15. Predicted my pain was inflicted by a tumor in my thoracic spine. To make it easier to understand, I inherited from my mother a rather rare disease or syndrome, don't care what you call it, called von Hippel-Lindau. Basically, in every part of my body, tumors can grow. To keep it short, I had a tumor in the same spot that hurt for over 5 years and told everyone, hey, maybe it's the tumor. The reaction was always the same. Oh, no, you just need to build up your muscles. No, that's because you keep sitting on your butt all day like a scrunched sack of potatoes. The tumor then caused a paralysis in my left leg from my toes up to my knee, and after the surgery that removed said tumor, I got paralyzed from waist down. The pain was gone, and the first day my mom visited me in the hospital, I told her with a crap-eating grin, "Ha, told you so." My mom began crying but was laughing at the same time and just said, yeah, you were right, as always. Only shame it had to come to that. Now I'm sitting in a wheelchair 4 months after surgery, back at work and making everyone jump out of the way as I am speeding through the hallways. Story 16. Watched a TV show called Lost Ollie with my family recently. It's kind of similar to Toy Story with a toy trying to get back to his owner. Throughout the first episode, the camera would cut between the toy, Ollie, and the owner, Billy. At the end of the episode, I said to my family, since Ollie doesn't age, wouldn't it be really sad if while he's looking for Billy, it's during a time where Billy is an adult, and all the scenes of Billy looking for Ollie are in the past? I watched the rest of the series on my own, and I effing knew it.
I love blind called shots like that, so that's awesome, and I'm sure was very, very satisfying. I think one of the only ones I've ever done with something like that was friends had me playing the game. It's fairly recent. It's a bunch of teenagers or 20-somethings in a cabin where, like, 2 of their friends died from a prank, and Rami Malek is there. What is the name of that game? I don't know, but I was literally maybe an hour into playing it or something with my friends because they wanted to see how I would react. I get spooked by horror games pretty easy. And within, like, an hour into it, I kind of laughed and joked with them. I'm just like, oh my God, wouldn't it be funny if, like, one of the girls, like, ate the other girl and then she turned into I won't say what it is because I know some cultures, the culture that has this creature doesn't like it being named. I don't know how strongly they all feel about that, but I'll respect that. But that is what it was. And they just stared at me for a second and I kept playing for a moment and I looked back at them and they're just like, and I suddenly just burst out laughing and I'm like, oh my God, did I just ruin the whole game? I then spent the rest of the run trying to kill all of them, but One girl survived. Dang.
Story 17. I remember a friend's little sister being a massive fan of some crime show, CSI, I think. She was talking about how she adores how a couple of her favorite characters are getting married and how cute they are. I haven't watched the show other than a few loose episodes on TV by accident, but I can smell a cheesy pattern every so often. I just blurted out, "Well, one or both of them will die before they get to do that." She didn't believe me and told me to stop saying things like that. Well, it took the next week's episode to air, and she called me out of the blue, basically crying, "They killed insert name here, right before the wedding. How did you know?" I was amused. Story 18. A few years ago, a coworker of mine started dating someone. He came in one day to see her, and I just got bad vibes, like really bad vibes. Couldn't pinpoint it. Told her, and she brushed it off like I was trying to ruin it on her. They split like a month later when she finds out he has a wife. 6 months later, he's in the news for brutally murdering said wife in a camper down in Florida. She apologized for questioning my gut instinct. That's probably the thing I most regret being right about. Story 19. I unfortunately work in a healthcare system. One day I was working on my med unit and noticed that one of my residents was a lot more chipper than usual. My coworkers assumed she was just getting better, and I said she would be gone by the time I came back from work on the Rona unit for a week. Possibly in the next 3 days, and that 2 others would go within 24 hours of her. I came back after 2 weeks, and apparently the very next night she passed, and then another gentleman on her floor passed, and then another lady from 2 floors down passed away before the 24 hours was up. That was probably the saddest I told you so I ever had.
Having worked a little bit in the medical field, especially with like nurses and stuff, there are some folks who have this, once again, I'm going to use the term sixth sense for this kind of stuff where they can just tell. Like certain patients apparently suddenly like just have this mindset and feel about them when they're near the end and other folks don't realize it. I heard one nurse once when I was training as a CNA explain it to me. It's like a hypothermia where when the hypothermia has almost killed you, you suddenly are like, "Ooh, I feel warm. Everything's fine. I can take off my coat even." And they said it was like that for death. So I never had to deal with that in how far I was in on that field, but that's how it was explained to me, so I don't know.
Story 20. A year ago, my family and I went to Vegas for the first time. The first day there, we're trying to get on something called the Deuce Bus, at least I think that's what it was called, but couldn't find the bus stop. Searching pretty much everywhere, but it eluded us something fierce. Myself, tired of this endless searching with no results, finally just asked, "Why don't we just ask one of the hotel employees where it was?" My parents, for whatever reason, probably stubbornness, thought this was a bad idea. After asking them twice more, they sent me to the nearest hotel to test my theory. Guess who managed to save the first day of our trip? Story 21. I was right about my sister's boyfriend even before I met him. The way she talked about him was different from the way she talked about meeting her past boyfriends. I don't know if it was her tone of speech or the words she used, but he had her completely infatuated with him from the start. She's been completely brainwashed and recently cut contact with us. They've been together for 4 years and had a son in February. This will be the first Christmas we won't see her, and we won't be able to celebrate my nephew's first Christmas. My mom is emotionally devastated not seeing her daughter and first grandchild. I hope I can distract my mom enough during Christmas to help her feel better during the holidays.
See, that one right there is heartbreaking. I've also had like family members, not direct family, but a little more extended family where our families just lost touch with them because of relationships like this where people kind of pull them away and you try and like warn them or something, or it's like, I don't think that person's very good. But I don't know how you get folks in those situations to see that and realize that. And it sucks because you care about that person so much, but they just get cut off. So I don't know. I wish you all the best, and I hope things get better eventually.
Story 22. I was at a mental hospital. A mix-up got me stuck there, and the weather was bad. Another patient comes up to me and asks me what's wrong. Without really thinking about it, I said something like, "The weather is bad." I noticed a staff member coming our direction and added something like, I bet you anything that she'll send us to the tornado shelter areas." The patient looked like he was about to say something like "not going to happen," but got cut off by the staff member telling us to head to the storm shelter area. I looked back at the dumbfounded patient and said, "Told ya." His mouth was hanging open in shock. Oh, that was in Tuscaloosa, during the F4 or F5 that went through. The medicine they forced me to take makes remembering dates impossible even now. I even have to check my phone to remember today's date. It has gotten better, but I can't really recall what happened yesterday, as only negative memories tend to stay, so all I recall is dizzy spells, pain, and the fact I was diagnosed with colon cancer last month. Yeah, sometimes it's best just to let the past go, as I can't do anything about the cancer, only my doctor can, so I must wait for them. Story 23. I have a bad habit about being right about a gut feeling since I was small. One time that sticks with me was my half-brother's funeral. His mom and other younger siblings came to the receiving, and his brother, who I used to go to school with, was pacing the floor and muttering. He had been known to have an explosive temper, and since my brother's death was a mystery at the time, there were some rumors about his wife floating around. She was innocent, by the way. I told my older brother I had a bad feeling and he needed to watch him. Sure enough, we get back inside to see both the brother and sister-in-law stepdad being held down from fighting each other. Seems as soon as bro followed the half-brother back inside, he started beating on things and making threats towards sister-in-law, and her stepdad wasn't having it and they were about to fight before getting pulled away. Long and short, my half-brother's mom and siblings were banned from the funeral and fined for the disturbance. We haven't heard from them since. Story 24. Number 65, I had the same thing happen to me, except I told my husband at the time we shouldn't have unprotected intercourse. He said it would be fine, and it was his birthday. It was the only time we didn't use protection, and 1 month later, I had a positive test. My oldest kids are 11 months apart. I yelled at him, "Told you so." He left me 2 years later saying that our second child was not his. Paternity test later, his son and he decided he didn't want to be a dad anyway, and we got divorced. I met a great man during our separation, and after my divorce, he asked me to marry him, and I did. He adopted my 2 eldest kids, and we've been married 17 years, have 5 kids, and 3 grandchildren. My life has been so much better since that I told you so.
Well, that story started off a little bit sad, but you know what? I'm really happy to hear how it ended up. It sounds like you got a wonderful, happily ever after with an amazing family. And, sometimes we go through some hurdles, but eventually end up where we want to be. So I'm really glad to hear that for you.
Story 25. A friend in my English period started where we counted down the seconds till the bell rings. Not one of us but my teacher had gotten the call right once, but the 4th time my teacher called the countdown for the bell, I noticed that the bell rang 15 seconds after the minute hand moved on the clock. I used my good memory to my advantage, and the next day at English class, I counted down from 15 when I saw the minute hand move by myself. As all my classmates were skeptical, I was going to hit it right. When I hit 0, the bell chimed, and I was screaming, "Yes, told ya!" as I rushed off to my next period. Story 26. I used to watch shows like Paramedics, Trauma Life in the ER, etc. when I was younger. I love the medical field. Unfortunately, I can't go into the medical field because a blind person going into the medical field would be a very bad idea. Anyway, I used to watch these shows all the time. Well, one night while watching Paramedics, they were telling the symptoms that this guy was having. I looked at my mom and went, "He's having a stroke." Keep in mind, I can't see him, so I can't really tell if his face is drooping or anything. I'm just going by the symptoms. Anyway, I said he's having a stroke. Well, towards the end of the episode, they gave updates. Guess what? He was having a stroke. I was right. Done that at 12 years old. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.